Hi, I'm Bob Hunter from Wood Magazine. Biscuit Joiner is a great joinery tool. It's really simple to use, but there's a few differences that really make an impact when it comes time to pick out which machine to buy. So let me show you some of those. All these machines will work great when you're referencing from the base of the tool. So if you're cutting a biscuit slot into the edge of this 3/4 inch board, just put it up against there, clamp it down, and plunge into the wood. It's going to work great every time. They're preset to reference on the middle of the center of a 3/4 inch thick board, so that'll work great every time. The problem comes when you have to use the fence and not the base. You never use both at the same time, so when you do have to use the fence, that's when you start to see some real differences between machines. Primarily, most of the machines have a fence lift system or an elevation system that's a rack and pinion. So that means when you turn a bolt or a knob, that the fence moves up and down. This is the easiest way and the most accurate way to get precise layout and design here. So 5 of the 6 machines that I have here have rack and pinion lifts on them. And they all work to varying degrees, but mostly successful. The final machine here from Triton has a different system in that it's set on dovetailed ways and it slides up and down manually. So you move this up and down. There's indicators here on the front with a scale, and you just set it to whatever depth you want to put, lock it down, and theoretically it would work. The problem with this one is that this has so much play in it that you can actually set it cockeyed, and your cut then is not going to be parallel to the face of the board that you're referencing from. And to add insult to injury, the scale, if you do get both of them lined up, the scale is not accurate. So you can't really necessarily count on that. So this one you're going to struggle a lot if you're using this fence to try to set up. It's going to take a lot of trial and error to get that set up right. Now, one of the main uses for a fence on a biscuit joiner is to cut slots in mitered workpieces like this if you were making a shadow box or something. So in order to do that, you have to really wrap around this miter frame and cut. It's the best way to do it. But there again, we see more distinctions. So let's take a look at a couple of machines. Some of those will do it better than others. Okay, the Porter Cable 557 has the best fence system because it can tilt 0 to 90. So you've got a 90-degree angle to the nose of the machine. Great for doing just straight border work, any edging or that. But it also has a 135 angle, which is going to be perfect. It's going to be dead on. So when we tighten that up, and we come up here and wrap around this, it gives us right what we want. And then we just need to adjust our fence up and down to get it right where we want it to be. This is really the best system for cutting a miter, a slot in a miter joint like this. But the Porter Cable also has a couple of flaws with its fence. One of the problems is that this large cutout in the center doesn't work very well if you're referencing into a board that's too narrow, because now you only have this little bit of reference out here. So what you have to do is take this included plastic adapter, which is included in the kit, and that slides onto here. It's kind of stiff. It just slides right over there to place. There's a couple of tabs that just go up into these pre-drilled holes. And now what you have is that this plastic insert helps to stabilize for when you're cutting into the end, say, of this 2-inch wide board. So it really helps a bunch to have that. This plastic is fairly stiff and rigid, and it could break very easily, so be gentle when you're working with it. Now moving on to the DeWalt tool. One of its problems is that the fence on it will not go past 90 degrees. So what you have to do is you can't cut that miter the way we just showed with the Porter Cable. So rather than wrapping around the toe, you're going to have to cut it more from the heel side. So what you have to do is double face tape on, use some double face tape. Just take a piece of 1/4 inch hardboard and put that onto there. Get it stuck real good. This will become a spacer then that you'll need. So then you set your doesn't seem to want to stick for me right now. Then when you just set your fence at 45 degrees, and then when you go, you have to cut this from the heel side rather than around the toe. Rather than wrapping around it, you'll cut it like this. And that spacer then elevates the biscuit blade up to the point where you can cut close enough to the heel so as you don't blow through the opposing face. Okay, the Craftsman and Ryobi joiners are identical. They're made by the same manufacturer in Asia. They're identical other than color and a little bit of differences on the handle. What they have here is a fence that rack and pinion again. They have a plastic adapter that kind of helps support the work, but one of the problems is that the sides are these little die cut pieces, which normally it wouldn't be a big problem on much work, but let's say you're wanting to cut a biscuit slot into a face frame to put onto the front of a cabinet. So you would rest your piece up against there. Let's say you're out here. Well, what happens is now you've got a real wobbly thing because your only reference surface is this thing that's less than 1/8 of an inch thick die cut metal on each side and this plastic insert which flexes a little bit. So this is a real tricky setup to do. My best suggestion there would be to try to put spacers below the base and not use the fence for that application. The Craftsman and Ryobi do, however, though, will tilt to 135. But again, this plastic insert gets in the way, so what you have to do is actually raise it up high, then bring it down and get it to your 135 angle. And then when you come down, it starts to flex out again. So it'll just work in 3/4 inch material barely, but it will not work in anything thicker than that, anything thinner than that, because you can't get the board up into there thick enough to make that cut. So it's kind of a tricky operation to do. The Makita biscuit joiner has multiple fences. So what you have here is a fence arm that folds down, has 2 detents on it, so when it's at 90 degrees, it's set perfectly for 3/4 inch stock. So if you slide a 3/4 inch board under there, just like we're referencing from the base, you're going to be perfectly centered in the thickness of the 3/4 inch stock. That's going to be a rare application because in most times you're doing this, you could also use it from the base. So what they do now is you have a sub fence, a 90-degree fixed angle sub fence that, like the Triton, wraps around a dovetailed ways, but it also has a rack and pinion lift. So that you just turn this and it raises the fence up and down. One of the problems that we have with this fence is that you can see how loose this other end is because it just simply wraps around this far end. So then when you get it to the height that you want, and then you tighten this cam locking lever, it actually moves it out of parallel. So it's really hard to set this one parallel and get it dead on. If you can't get it parallel to the blade, then what you're going to end up with is cuts that are uneven to your referencing surface. And then if you're using it in mating pieces, which you should be, they're not going to line up and you're going to get uneven boards. So it's really kind of a tricky thing to work with. So when you bring this, to do this then with a 135, which you can do by tilting the fence, it has a 45-degree detent that it falls into. Lock that in place. Then when you come over to your board and you put it in place, one of the problems with this unit is that I'm having trouble here getting this to adjust. It's hard to get this up closer to the heel being down here. It's hard to get that cutting line down by the heel without the fence up here breaking off this crisp point at the toe of the miter. So this is really a tricky one. That's why Makita gives you another option, which is to take off this 90-degree fence, put on this black reference plate, which is included in the kit, slides right in and locks in place. Then when you go to make your miter cut, You set the fence at 45, lock it in place, and now, like the DeWalt, you just reference from the heel side of things, and it works much better. The bad point about doing this is that you're not fully captured around that miter, so it's not quite as positive of a lock. It's a little bit more loose. You really have to hold on to it good, but then you make that miter cut and it'll get you there. Okay. And finally, the Triton is very similar to the Makita in that its fence tilts when it has the 90-degree fixed fence. It'll tilt to it'll even go to 180, which doesn't help you much in these things, but it'll go at 135. The problem is there is no detent to where it locks, so you have to eyeball it onto this cast piece, and it's really kind of hard to see the marking, the arrow point, and get that 45 just right. So it's kind of a trick, and it has the same issue where the fence arms here will crush those and break off those crisp points. So this one does not come with an adapter. You would have to go back to doing like the DeWalt and tape on a piece of 1/4-inch hardboard to cut it from the heel side like we did here.